Work takes up most of your time. That's why you should use Stamps.com to save time with your mailing and shipping. Stamps.com will simplify your postage needs and add valuable time back into your workday, so you have flexibility to focus on more important things. Stamps.com can handle your mailing and shipping needs with rates up to 88% off UPS and USPS. Send invoices, checks, certified mail, packages, and anything else you need to keep your business running with Stamps.com. If you sell online, connecting with every major marketplace and shopping cart is easy. Plus, you can schedule package pickups through their dashboard and automatically see your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers with Stamps.com's Rate Advisor. Add more flexibility to your workday with Stamps.com. Go to Stamps.com/program to sign up for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/program.
We talk sex, lies, murder.
When 2 is company, 3 is murder.
This is the epitome of it right here.
How does your life go from being a housewife to participating in a murder?
The pastor of the church having sex with another woman.
This is beyond dysfunctional.
Sex, Lies, and Murder. A Real Crime Original podcast from Reels. New episodes Wednesdays on Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, and Spotify.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 303 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very, very well.
Good.
Ready to get into a TCAT Unsolved.
Always like that.
Yeah, we have a True Crime All the Time out right now on Brian Trimble, a guy who orchestrated the murder of his wife for insurance money, greed, because he didn't want to give up stuff in a divorce. I mean, just unbelievable to me.
It's a good case, and I agree. It was unbelievable why he did what he did.
Yeah, no, it really is when you bottom line it. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Allison Ald.
Hey, Allison.
Carolyn.
Hey, Carolyn.
Cherry Love.
Hey, thank you, Cherry Love.
Lane Lozier.
What's going on, Lane?
Aaron S. jumped out at our highest level.
Hey, thank you, Aaron S.
Mariah K.
What's going on, Kay?
Chris Onyeka.
Ah, hey, Onika.
Mindy Hayes.
What's going on, Mindy?
Kinsey K.
Hey, Kinsey.
Victoria Olson.
Appreciate that, Olson.
Hannah Wooden.
Hey, Wooden.
Ashley Obdell.
Ah, awesome, Ashley.
Alexis Erickson.
Hey, Erickson.
Asia Chan Orlando.
What's going on, Asia?
Hannah Colbert.
Hey, Hannah.
Xenia Gutschow.
Well, appreciate that, Xenia.
Carla.
Good old Carla.
Brian Ricketts.
There's Brian.
Vincent.
Hey, Vincent.
Stephanie Larimore.
Larimore.
And last but not least, Rebecca Hurley.
What's up, Hurley?
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Kyle Gifford.
You're awesome, Kyle.
Yeah, appreciate the new support, the continued support. We had great PayPal donations from Robin Taylor.
Hey, Robin.
Alicia Hunt.
Thank you, Alicia.
Shirley Hobart.
Hey, Shirley.
And Eddie Matten.
Oh, thank you again, Eddie.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am ready.
In May 2000, a young Australian scientist named Rodney Marks died unexpectedly at a research base in the South Pole. His cause of death was determined to be acute methanol poisoning. Almost 23 years later, no one knows how Rodney ingested the poison or whether his death was an accident, a suicide, or a murder. It is possible that Rodney Marks was the first murder victim in Antarctica.
So for me, Antarctica would probably be one of the last places I'd want to go to. I'm not into the cold.
No, it's not on my bucket list, if that's what you're saying. Anywhere that you can lose a digit in like less than a minute, where things can start falling off, I'm out.
That's a problem.
It is. I don't like the extreme cold anyway. Rodney Marks was born in Geelong, Victoria, Australia. He earned a scholarship to attend private school where he grew his interest in math and science. Rodney earned a bachelor's degree at the University of Melbourne and a doctorate in physics from the University of New South Wales.
See, I love physics.
Yeah, I know you do. Now, those are very impressive credentials. Maybe not to you because you have so many doctorates and, JDs and all kinds of initials that you have hanging on your wall. In my world, those are very impressive. Rodney enjoyed surfing, music, watching football, and being a goth. According to the New Zealand Herald, Rodney also played guitar in a heavy metal band that performed from the South Pole during the New Year's celebration in 2000.
Coming live from the South Pole.
In 1994, Rodney went to Antarctica for the first time. In November 1997, he returned to spend a year working on a telescope project. Rodney spent the winter of 1997 and then into 1998 as part of Chicago Center for Astrophysical Research, South Pole Infrared Explorer Project.
Well, that's a lot to say.
That is a mouthful. I was looking for an acronym, and maybe they have one, but that is very long. During what was called his first wintering over, Rodney worked on the Spirex telescope and used some data for his thesis. He was very popular with the crew on base. Rodney loved to socialize with others and even gave people free French lessons. His thesis advisor had recommended that he participate in a short-term project in France, and Rodney became fluent in just a few months.
It tells you how smart somebody is, right? When you can pick up on a language and, I don't want to say master it, but become fluent in it that quick, that tells you something.
Yeah. I know you speak a number of languages.
12.
To me, to become what somebody would think of as fluent takes a very long time. If you just go over there and can do it in a few months,
yeah,
I agree with you. Either you're really, really smart, you have unbelievable language skills, or a combination of the two.
Yeah, for sure.
Gene Davison, a scientist on base, told The Age, the best thing you take away from wintering over is the friendships. He described Rodney as a normal, laid-back Aussie who didn't fit the typical image of a science geek. So I've mentioned this term, wintering over. I never actually saw the definition, but I just assumed it meant you're there for the winter.
Yeah.
You're kind of stuck there. And so, I do think in that sort of situation, you get to know people pretty well.
Yeah, I think your pool of friends is limited. I mean, obviously, whoever's there, that's who you're going to make friends with.
And you're spending like so much time with them that you're going to get to know each other pretty darn well. Rodney returned to Antarctica in November 1999. He had to pass a battery of physical and psychological tests. He had also spent the previous winter season at the station with no issues. At the time of his death, Rodney worked at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station. Amundsen Scott South Pole Station is a research center operated by the U.S. National Science Foundation. Rodney was hired by a contractor called Raytheon Polar Services. According to science.org, he was working for the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, working on their Antarctic Submillimeter Telescope and Remote Observatory, ASTRO project.
Man, I was wondering if this was the Antarctica submillimeter that he was working on. I'm
glad
to hear that.
Okay. So you had that in mind as we started talking.
Absolutely.
ASTRO is part of the University of Chicago Center for Astrophysical Research in Antarctica. The center used a 1.7 meter telescope to measure spectra of atomic carbon and carbon monoxide in the Milky Way.
It's just a little bit better than the 1.6.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that, probably from you. But, joking aside, obviously this is very technical stuff. It is flying way over my head and did while we were doing the research. I know it hit home with you because of, how smart you are. Again, I think it goes to show you, number one, how smart this guy was.
For sure. Yeah.
And how specialized, some of these type of research things really are.
Yeah.
I mean, measuring atomic carbon and carbon monoxide in the Milky Way. Okay. Sounds pretty specific to me.
Yeah, sure does.
Now, I know the Milky Way is pretty big, but it's still.
Well, if you get the king size.
Yeah, which I always do.
Yeah.
I always do. Rodney Marks was wintering over at the station with 49 other people, including scientists, technicians, staff, and construction personnel. Some of their projects included measuring ozone in the atmosphere and capturing subatomic particles and neutrinos from space.
Well, neutrinos, because just in case you don't know.
Because I don't.
Yeah, that's a subatomic particle that is very similar to electron, but it just doesn't have any electrical charge and a very small mass.
Okay.
Just in case you didn't know.
So that is a new segment that I'm going to call Gibby Science Hour.
Oh, that's nice.
According to the New York Times, Rodney Marks was operating the submillimeter telescope, which can observe radiation from gas clouds around star-forming regions in space. So he was required to coordinate remote experiments and to collect data on viewing conditions. And apparently he was the only one trained to work with ASTRO. He was fixing a problem with one of the telescope's receivers at the time of his death. It was said that there were about 250 people on this base during the summer, but during the winter, the numbers were reduced to just around 50.
It's a pretty small population.
It is. And like you said, that's the pool of people that, you have to congregate with, to talk to. So you are going to get to know them pretty well. They're going to get to know you. Rodney fell in love with a 33-year-old woman named Sonia Walter. They planned to get married. Rodney and Sonia were described as a lively couple by the New Zealand Herald. They both played in the on-base band, which was called Fanny Pack and the Big Nancy Boys.
That's an interesting name, the Fanny Packs and the Big Nancy Boys.
Well, I've said a number of times how much I dislike fanny packs. People have sent them to us in the mail.
They have.
asked us to wear them on camera. I am just not a fanny pack type of person. Rodney dyed his hair purple and Sonia dyed her hair green. Darren Schneider, who was on base that winter, told the Herald, it's rare to see people that seemed so perfectly matched. Rodney and Sonia were inseparable. Sonia was able to change her posting so she could spend the winter on base. So we just said, 250 in the summer, 50 in the winter. Why do you think that is? My assumption is not that many people want to be there in the winter.
I'm thinking the summer's probably cold enough.
Yeah, but it's got to be better than the winter, right? For sure. So when you hear that this woman changed her posting so that she could be with him,
it tells you.
That tells you something. On May 12, 2000, 32-year-old Rodney Marks died suddenly of methanol poisoning, but his cause of death was unknown at the time. Apparently, Rodney was sick for about 36 hours before he died. According to the New Zealand Herald, Sonia Walter gave a statement to the police about the events of May 11th and 12th. She said that Rodney felt sick and experienced poor vision, which would be later recognized as a symptom of methanol poisoning. He also went to bed early, which, according to her, was unusual for him. He woke up at some point during the night to take antacid tablets. He woke up at 5:30 a.m. and vomited blood. The two of them went to Biomed, which is the base's medical facility, Dr. Robert Thompson looked at Mark and said he believed his sickness was linked to alcohol withdrawal. Rodney said that he hadn't drank for 38 hours.
Well, if you drink a lot of alcohol, and you don't have any alcohol for a while, you could have withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah, but when you say a lot of alcohol, doesn't it take like a lot of alcohol every day to then produce those types of withdrawal issues if you suddenly stop?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, we're not talking about somebody who has 3 or 4 after work every night.
Yeah, just 3 or 4 is not going to do it. But if you drink more than that, it could be a problem.
Yeah, I would think it'd have to be quite a bit. Now, I don't know what the exact amount would be, and it could be different for different people.
Well, that's true.
Rodney went back and forth from his room to the medical facility throughout the day. He started having trouble breathing, so he saw the base doctor. The doctor spoke with medical experts via satellite. According to the New Zealand Herald, Dr. Thompson drew blood from Rodney's right arm and later said he noticed 2 additional needle marks. Rodney went back to Biomed for oxygen and Valium. Sonia noticed that he was very agitated. She told outlets later that he couldn't lie still and he was breathing heavily. He returned to the medical facility at 3 p.m. It would later be revealed that the base's automatic medical analyzer, called the Ectochem machine, could have found signs of methanol poisoning, but apparently the machine wasn't working at that time.
Well, that's why it's critical to have those type of machines always working, right? It's no good to have that type of machine if you're not going to service it and have it running.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You can have all the technology in the world. It doesn't do any good if it's on the fritz and it's not working. Now, is it a little tougher to get things fixed when you're in the South Pole? I would think so.
Yeah, I'm guessing it is.
You know, you can't call Dave's 24-hour repair and have them drive out to the South Pole to fix your Ectochem machine.
That's right. It's going to be a little delay.
According to the New Zealand Herald, Rodney's condition quickly worsened. Sonia said, "I thought he was getting better. His pupils were huge. They got smaller. He squeezed my hand. He tried to sit up. He then quit breathing, and we tried CPR. Base staff tried to resuscitate Rodney for 45 minutes, but they were unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead at 6:45 p.m. on May 12th, 2000. So obviously, you know, he visited the medical facility a number of times. He was seen by medical personnel a number of times. The one thing that really jumped out at me was the doctor saying later that he noticed additional needle marks in his arm.
Well, it certainly makes you wonder why the 2 needle marks were there. Did he do something? Did somebody do something to him?
Well, and I would think after he dies, those needle marks would become even more suspicious. According to Science magazine, Dr. Thompson addressed the 48 other people on base and told them that Rodney died of unknown but natural causes. According to science.org, his death was devastating. To the other staff at the station, the 9 remaining scientists said they would attempt to put the observatory back into operation. And we've mentioned, you know, this small crew.
Yeah.
Probably got pretty close. It was tight knit, I bet.
Sure.
You know, so to have a death among this very small population, I do believe it would have hit very hard, but yet these people had jobs to do.
Yeah, I mean, they could grieve, but they had to continue moving on with their reason to be there.
Yeah, work had to get done. Rodney's body had to remain at the research center until the winter season ended. His cause of death would not be determined until his body was removed from the research center and an autopsy could be performed.
And for me, that's kind of strange, right?
Well, it's strange based on what we do, what we talk about,
Right.
You know, the timing of things, very critical. You know, if you think about any case, now let's take the South Pole out of it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a case here in the States. If someone dies and there's any suspicion, let's say a couple of needle marks in their arm, you're going to want to get that autopsy done as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Number one, you want to determine cause of death. That may lead you to a ruling of homicide, which then means, okay, you got to start an investigation. But in this scenario, you really can't do that.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's too difficult to get planes in. And
a lot of the research, it talked about how people working in the South Pole during the winter season are trapped due to the severe weather conditions, no matter what, even if they are severely ill. So put that down on the list of cons for me.
Big con.
Yeah, for going to the South Pole. The researchers and staff can't leave until October or November when planes are finally able to land in the area. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that the Amundsen Scott Polar Station is cut off from March to October.
Yeah, I remember that there was a movie about these dogs that pulled a sleigh. I know that's not what it's called, but
like sled dogs?
Sled dogs.
or is this an alternate Santa movie where dogs are pulling the sleigh? Yeah, some type of sled dogs.
They had to get out. They had to leave, evacuate really quick, and they couldn't take the dogs with them. And the guy, it was his dogs. He wanted to get back and get his dogs, and he eventually got the sign off. And eventually, months later, were able to fly back into this zone, and the dogs were still alive. That's when the tears come down your face.
Sure. What's the movie called?
Maybe it was called Sled Dogs. I don't think so.
I don't think I've seen it. And you're really not, I don't think you're giving me enough to work with here.
Yeah. My memory's a little faint on, because you know how sharp I am.
Oh, normally.
Yeah.
Normally. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey, TCAT listeners, whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance. Then they show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options. Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote and you'll be able to choose the best option for you fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself. Enjoying the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Cherie Warren was a young mother looking for a fresh start. In the process of a divorce, she had moved out, found a great new job, and even found a new boyfriend. Life was looking up, but on a mild October evening, after a long day at work, Cherie said goodbye to her coworkers, left the office, and was never heard from again. All eyes quickly turned towards her estranged husband. He had a checkered past, having lured another woman into the mountains where he beat her with a tire iron. But there was another man that piqued the interest of investigators, Cherie's new boyfriend. He was a former reserve police officer with a dark history of sexual violence. The two men closest to Cherie, one swore he loved her, the other seemed not to care. But did one of them murder her? In season 3 of the hit true crime podcast Cold, host Dave Colley digs into what really happened to Cherie. Follow Cold wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Prime members, you can binge the entire series ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today. There was one example where a former base physician named Jerry Nielsen was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1998 and could not be evacuated until a ski-equipped jet could land in the area. So again, this is something that going into it, but who knows when they're going to experience some kind of serious health issue.
Well, that's true.
And that's why, it's not something that I would want to risk, even on top of the severe cold.
Yeah.
Rodney Marks was the third death in the South Pole in 35 years. In 1966, a worker died while an aircraft was being unloaded. In 1980, A worker was clearing snow from an air shaft and was killed when the snow collapsed. Rodney's death was the second death in the U.S. Antarctic program. On January 8th, 2000, 43-year-old Canadian citizen John Biciata died at the McMurdo Station in Antarctica. New Zealand conducted an inquest into John's death and found that he died of natural causes.
Again, probably another reason why not to go. If you're going to die just from moving snow around, I mean, I don't like to move snow around just all in the driveway.
No, but, if you think about that amount of snow, okay, an avalanche, even a smaller snow collapse could be deadly.
Sure, the compression from that.
The NSF issued a statement that Rodney died of natural causes, which was the assumption until his body could be taken for an autopsy. On October 30th, 2000, Rodney's body was taken out of storage and flown to Christchurch, New Zealand. The inquest took place in New Zealand because Marks died in New Zealand's Antarctic territory. His autopsy was completed by forensic pathologist Dr. Martin Sage. Sage found that Rodney died from ingesting the equivalent of a large glass of methanol.
Well, that's not good.
That cannot be good. He did note that Rodney had needle marks on his arms, but had no illegal drugs in his body.
No, I mean, I'm not a scientist.
Per se.
Right. So I'm just wondering if he did have any at that time, at this point, when the body's released and sent to New Zealand, could his body absorb it already? Would there be a way to maybe not get a trace?
So to me, now the needle marks become much more suspicious. I'm sure there are people who could have thought, all right, needle marks, maybe he had some illegal drugs that he took with him that he was taking that way, right? By injecting himself in his arms. But it sounds like that wasn't the case. According to Science Magazine, Sage announced the cause of death in December. Methanol poisoning. Rodney consumed 150 milliliters of methanol under unknown circumstances. By the time he went to the medical center, his body converted the methanol into formic acid, which led to acute acidosis. Sage reported that the source of the methanol is not apparent from the accounts given to date, and there is a distinct possibility that Rodney might not have known he was drinking methanol.
I think I would know if I'm drinking something like that, but maybe not. Maybe it's...
Well, you don't know what methanol tastes like.
I've smelt methanol before.
Have you?
Isn't that in the gas? Sometimes in the gas? Well, maybe I'm not smelling methanol.
Don't they put something in to make it smell?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I know for a fact you don't know what it tastes like.
No, I don't.
So you can't make that statement. Now, where have you heard acute acidosis before?
I have heard that.
Do you know where?
I'm trying, as we talked about it and we've seen the research, I was thinking, where have I seen that before?
A Few Good Men.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
That the guy who died from what they called, I believe, acute acidosis. Now, before all this came out, Rodney's colleagues assumed he died of a stroke or heart attack. The Age reported methanol is the simplest alcohol compound. It is poisonous, flammable, colorless, and tasteless, but has a slight smell. So maybe you have smelled it,
Yeah.
but you have not tasted it.
I did not dealt it.
But the fact that it is tasteless is important.
Sure it is. Yeah.
It wouldn't taste like some chemical, apparently. So you could drink it and not know that you were drinking something that would really hurt you. Now, it did say undiluted, it would burn the throat or be detected by smell. So I don't know if it was undiluted or diluted, because that would change that equation.
Unless you're one of those people who just can't smell things. I've got a few people I know that they have no sense of smell. You know, I don't need to worry about showering around them because they will never know.
But do they feel a burning in their throat?
Don't know that part.
Because I think that might be a dead giveaway. I mean, this is used as fuel cleaning solution, in antifreeze. It's kind of nasty stuff. Not something you want to be drinking.
No.
Anthony Stark, astronomer for the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory and the principal for ASTRO, said that methanol was typically used in January when the telescope was being cleaned and reassembled and the bottles were clearly marked and locked away. So I take from that, basically what he's saying is if this protocol was followed, this would not be something that someone would drink accidentally.
Right.
Or it would be hard to. But by the time evidence of methanol poisoning was discovered, all the scientists and staff that were there had already gone home and the living quarters had been cleaned. So, basically all the potential evidence of a homicide, if there was one, was gone.
Yeah, there's no evidence there anymore, right?
Well, and that's why we brought up, the delay in the autopsy. If you don't know the cause of death, you don't even know that you have something to investigate. And by the time it's figured out, there's nothing left to investigate, or there's no evidence to look at. Detective Senior Sergeant Grant Wormald took over the investigation for the New Zealand police. Suicide or an accident were possible, but seemed unlikely. The third possibility was that Rodney ingested or drank methanol as the victim of a prank or a homicide.
Possible.
Well, we mentioned, Stark saying that this methanol was kept in bottles that were labeled, clearly labeled.
Yeah.
But if someone were messing around, could they put that in an alcohol bottle?
Sure.
Or if they were doing more than messing around and had evil intention, could they do something similar or, make it so that somebody, in this case, Rodney, thought he was drinking something else? All Detective Wormald had was an autopsy report and a few interviews. The interviews describe details of Mark's illness and the efforts made to save his life. So not a lot to go on from an investigative standpoint.
Yeah, pretty limited.
Wormald's investigation took years to complete, and he was left with more questions than answers. The inquest into Rodney's death took place on December 13th, 2006. 3 possibilities were proposed at the inquest. Rodney was a known binge drinker. So one possibility put forth was that he deliberately took methanol to get high. Another possibility was that Rodney took methanol to end his own life.
Well, those are all possibilities. I get it.
According to Monsters and Critics, the third possibility was that he was killed by someone else at the base who put methanol in his food or drink as a prank or with a more sinister intention, according to Detective Wormald. Wormald said, in my view, it is most unlikely that Dr. Marks ingested the methanol knowingly. Police have not ruled out that this was as the direct result of the act of another person, although there is no evidence that this occurred. Wormald also said that suicide was the least likely cause of death. Rodney had recently started a close relationship with Sonia Walter. He was active in his work. He was social. He had no financial worries and was striving to complete a significant piece of academic work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think it relates to suicide at all.
Well, I think what he's saying is there's nothing that suggested
Right.
that this guy was having the type of issues that may lead somebody to do that. Now, you can't always know from the outside what's going on in somebody's head.
That's true.
What you can say is that this guy had a lot going for him.
Yeah.
He was in love. He had friends. Apparently he had no financial problems. He had a good job. According to The Guardian, evidence at the inquest showed that Rodney was known for binge drinking to mask the symptoms of Tourette's syndrome. One colleague described Rodney as a brilliant, witty, and steady sort of bloke who drank to excess on occasion.
Oh, isn't that binge drinking?
Yeah. Drinking to excess on occasion, I think that would be almost the definition of binge drinking. To me, binging doesn't mean you do it all day, every day.
Right.
Maybe that's just my way of thinking. But it's interesting that we find out that he had Tourette's syndrome, and that it's thought that, he drank to mask the symptoms of that.
Yeah, it depends on what type of symptoms he had. Maybe he had tics or something like that and wanted the alcohol to be the reason why he did it.
Well, there are a lot of different symptoms of Tourette's syndrome. It was suggested that Rodney accidentally poisoned himself in an attempt to make his own alcohol. I think the problem with that theory is that it wasn't like there weren't alcoholic beverages available on the base.
Yeah, you could get alcoholic beverages on the base if you wanted them.
So, to me, why would he need to make his own or try to make his own? Detective Wormold also pointed out that because Rodney was an experienced drinker, he would know how dangerous making homemade alcohol could be.
Well, we said he was a really smart guy.
Yes.
Why would he want to risk it?
According to reports at the inquest, Americans didn't do much to help. None of the organizations gave much information, even after the New Zealand police reached out to the DOJ for help. The police had been trying to obtain a list of all the people on base since 2002, according to the New Zealand Herald. Investigators found the list of people working on the base online and only received 13 responses to a questionnaire they sent out. Detective Wormold said that the New Zealand police believed that U.S. organizations did a full investigation, but they had no access to it. Coroner Richard McElrea formally adjourned the inquest on December 13th, 2016 to write his finding. Almost 2 years later, he ruled that the cause of Rodney Marks' death was acute methanol poisoning, but the circumstances were still unclear. Rodney's death was unintended, the overdose most likely happening 1 to 2 days earlier, and he was either unaware or didn't understand the implications of the overdose. So, I found this part interesting. The acute methanol poisoning, that was nothing new, not surprising.
Right.
To me, what is surprising is that his death was ruled unintended, because I don't know how a person could come up with that conclusion without facts to back it up. And there were no facts given that really did back it up.
Yeah, you're right.
Now you can take a stab at it, you can guess at it, but to me, it saying the circumstances were still unclear, that makes sense. But then to go on and say that the death was unintended, to me, that makes it sound as though they believed that Marks ingested the methanol, whether knowingly or unknowingly, rather than someone else causing him or tricking him into ingesting it.
Yeah, I think their statements conflict each other.
A little bit. If everything is so unclear, how did you come up with that?
Right.
According to the Sydney Morning Herald, the coroner noted that the blood analysis machine was not working, which compromised the medical assistance available to Marks. Again, that makes sense. It's just common sense.
Right.
If that machine had been working and they would have been able to detect the methanol, I'm sure there are steps that could have been taken
to reverse the effects.
Yeah, to help him and probably save his life. I don't know to what degree. It was said that the likely source of the methanol was the supplies on base, which were available to someone in Rodney's position. Yeah, and I'm not sure that people are bringing methanol with them, but maybe, hey, I don't know.
Hey, man, did you bring that methanol with you?
The coroner said there was no evidence to support the theory that Rodney was murdered or the victim of a prank. And here again, this is something that, I've talked about before. Making a determination, in this case, that it was unintended, coming out and saying there's no evidence that he was murdered or a victim of a prank. So where's the evidence on the other side?
Yeah, if you can say this, why can't you present something for that side.
According to ABC Australia, the coroner also determined there is no suggestion of suicide. It could well be that he thought he had consumed ethanol from laboratory sources, but in fact had consumed methanol. He was known to binge drink alcohol. And it does seem as though this appears to be at the root of everything.
Yeah.
The fact that he was a binge drinker. It keeps coming up. Is that how the coroner came to the conclusion that this is the most likely scenario? But again, I will ask the question, where's the evidence?
I think that's hard to give evidence towards that. Where are you going to get it from?
Well, and there's no mention of it in the research. The Sydney Morning Herald wrote that the coroner also said that it was likely Rodney would have disclosed his methanol consumption if he knew about it.
Yeah, I think if he did drink it
knowingly. Yeah.
At the time he started feeling sick, I think he would have said, hey, doc, I drank this stuff. It's probably what's causing me to feel the way I'm feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. If somebody thought their life was in jeopardy, I think that's something that they would disclose. Now, if he drank it and thought it was ethanol, then he would not be able to disclose it because he didn't know it. Or if he drank it unknowingly because somebody put it in his drink or spiked, a drink or whatever it was, he wouldn't be able to disclose it either because he wouldn't know it. The coroner also noted the jurisdictional issues that occurred with the inquiry, and according to ABC Australia, said that the New Zealand police were not satisfied that they had received full cooperation from Raytheon Polar Service and the United States National Science Foundation. The coroner went on to say, the facts of this case and partial outcomes point to an urgent need to set comprehensive rules of investigation and accountability for deaths in Antarctica on a fair and open basis. So, yeah, I get that if the United States, whatever part of the United States, right, whatever group,
right,
did some investigation, found something, and didn't share that information, that would be wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe it takes cases like this for them to realize that there needs to be better cooperation between all the different international agencies.
Yeah, the thing that I have, though, is what type of investigation was done when there was no understanding of how this man died?
That's a good point.
Because that happened so much later. So I don't really know. The U.S. NSF denied allegations that they didn't cooperate with New Zealand and said that they worked with the coroner's office in their inquiry. Spokesman Peter West told the New Zealand Herald that they provided all the information they were asked to. We understand the coroner takes issue with that, but we believe we did do everything required of us and beyond. The agency has voluntarily appeared at a hearing to answer the coroner's questions, has given extensive statements to the coroner, and has provided direct access to individuals who have personal knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Dr. Marks' death. Shocker that we have conflicting sides.
Yeah.
It's like every case we do really every case we do.
Right.
One person says this. I mean, you have it more on TCAT, when you get to trial. The prosecution says this. The defense has an argument that flies in the face of it, tries to directly, counter it. But, that's also what you see in life, whether it's politics or, my wife and I arguing about whether she said we were leaving at 7 or 7:30.
Right. Yeah. The old, he said, she said. Yeah.
She says that she said 7. I said that she said 7:30. And I'm always left wishing that all of our conversations were secretly recorded.
You can just do the playback button.
So I could replay them. West said that they sent out the police questionnaire through Raytheon to all the last known addresses of the crew. None of the questionnaires were returned for bad addresses. And we said that only 13 of them were filled out. But that's kind of on the individuals that received them.
Yeah, if they didn't feel like replying, that's their choice.
Now, you would hope that they would want to cooperate, but it sounds like either some of them didn't get it, some of them got it and threw it away and said, hey, maybe they didn't even work there anymore.
I don't even open up like 95% of my mail.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
that's why you're in receivership at this point in time. But
well, that's true.
West said that Warmold's statement that he was unable to access the full investigation done by NSF was a misconception, and only a medical review was completed, which was given to the coroner. And to me, this goes back to what I was just saying a little bit ago. What type of investigation was really done?
Right.
Because they had no idea that this was let's call it a suspicious death. They didn't know how this guy died.
So what were they looking for?
Well, you're not going to do a criminal type of investigation unless you think there's a chance that a crime has been committed. When the cause of death is not determined until, many, many months later, and all the people have gone home, I think that type of investigation becomes much tougher.
Sure. You have no one to question. The place has been cleaned. Things have been tossed out. What are you going to find?
But in March 2009, the New Zealand Herald reported that a homicide inquiry into Rodney's death should have been conducted, according to an internal report for the U.S. NSF. The internal report was referenced in documents from the inquest. The Herald on Sunday edition of the New Zealand Herald was granted access to the documents. Earlier that month, the documents reveal heavy drinking and drug use at the Amundsen station. The documents also detail the legal, diplomatic, and jurisdictional hurdles the police had to deal with during their investigation. In these files, Detective Warmold testified that he was stonewalled while dealing with the U.S. National Science Foundation. He was trying to get copies of their inquiries into Rodney's death, as well as contact information for the other employees, but the agency did not give him their inquiries or any contact information. They only agreed to forward a questionnaire after they approved the questions. All right, so we have a little more information.
Right.
According to Warmold.
So it sounds like they're kind of making it a little difficult.
Well, I think they could have made it easier for sure.
Sure, yeah.
Now, they argued that they didn't really have any inquiries or much in the way of an investigation because, of what we talked about. Now, you can argue, should they have given out the contact information? According to the New Zealand Herald, Warmold did manage to access one inquiry from a former employee. The report was completed by a foundation doctor and stated, when an individual aged 32 years dies unexpectedly, the matter warrants a homicide investigation.
That makes sense.
Does it? So you're saying that any 30-something-year-old person that dies
of an unknown reason, unknown causes, yeah,
should have a homicide investigation started. So, and I'm not saying you're wrong.
No, I know.
I'm just posing the question because, yes, that's young.
It is young.
But people die.
They do. Yeah, I think some type of investigation has to occur, but you're right. It doesn't have to be homicide.
Yeah, that's the word that I'm trying to figure out if that makes sense or not. Yeah, I agree. Somebody dies at your facility, there should be an investigation. But how can you do a homicide investigation when there's no information that a homicide has occurred?
Right.
Because at that point, they didn't have one. So I don't know. People are going to take sides on that one. According to Science Magazine, a team of physicians completed a report in July 2000. After reviewing Rodney's medical notes, they concluded that an additional lab investigation and other analysis were warranted. The review was led by the chief medical advisor of Raytheon Polar Services, Gerald Katz. The review also stated that several tests were not performed, but were available at the time and would have been helpful in narrowing the diagnostic possibilities. Okay, Now, when you get this information, this makes it sound like not only should more have been done in the way of an investigation, but tests weren't done that could have possibly figured out that he was suffering from methanol poisoning, and those tests weren't done. So if that is true, obviously that is a big issue.
It is.
According to Science Magazine, the report noted there is no evidence to point to homicide, accidental poisoning, environmental toxicity, or infection. The coroner said that their conclusion was premature because the cause of death was not released yet. The coroner's report acknowledges the limitations of the investigation, but states that the scene could have been preserved and statements could have been taken, but very little of this process happened.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation, right?
Yeah, and there is a little bit of conflicting information. And I think, even certain people are conflicting or contradicting themselves. When you're talking about this coroner, he admits the cause of death was not released, but is saying the scene should have been preserved. Until when?
Yeah.
6 months later, when the autopsy can occur, or, however many months later? In a perfect world, I guess you would say, yeah.
But at that time, they didn't think they had a homicide. They didn't think there was a reason to preserve.
Now, if you want to talk about getting statements from everyone and preserving that, I think that's very doable.
Sure.
And I don't think that's too much to ask.
No, I think that's should almost be
procedurized.
Yeah.
I would say so.
I'm assuming they have some type of security policing at the facility, I would think.
I don't know. I can't imagine there's a whole lot of need for it in Antarctica.
Well, that's true.
And there's only 49 people there.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. Maybe one security guard.
I mean, I'm thinking somebody's got to look out for those polar bears.
Maybe he gets like one Barney Fife bullet.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Maybe he just gets like a safety patrol vest.
And a whistle.
Yeah,
I really don't know. There wasn't anything in there that talked about security. According to the New Zealand Herald, Warmold requested NSF reports on Rodney's death and the reports from the CAT-Chem medical computer. He was told there were no relevant reports. The NSF conducted one inquiry, but because it was a medical inquiry, he was told it was of little value to your inquiry. The coroner would later disagree with this and said that medical aspects were vital to the inquiry. Warmold eventually did get access to this report and others. The report contains a statement from a doctor that Rodney's death immediately warrants a homicide investigation.
So it makes you wonder why they said that the statement had little value to your inquiry. Sounds like it had more than little value.
I think that's the argument that the New Zealand police are making.
Yeah.
There was very little in the way of cooperation. That's what they're saying. And I do think this statement is very important. Why would a doctor say or write down that Rodney's death immediately warrants a homicide investigation? I don't know the details, but there was something that led this doctor to believe that something wasn't right.
And if they would have gotten statements early on, maybe they would know why.
2 former NSF staff members came forward with important information. William Silva, a doctor at a nearby station, gave Warmold the medical report done by the NSF. He also reviewed Dr. Robert Thompson's notes and criticized some of his actions. Harry Mahar worked for the NSF in Christchurch, New Zealand, as the health and safety officer for the Antarctic program. Warmold found him at the State Department in Washington. During their candid conversation, which was later sworn in an affidavit, Mahar said that the NSF had conducted several inquiries into Rodney Marks' death. They did a medical review and had lab containers tested to see if they were correctly labeled as methanol. Bottles of alcohol were also tested to make sure the contents matched the labels. So there was some stuff done.
Right.
And it does kind of back up this assertion by the New Zealand police that they didn't get what they asked for. Now, eventually they got it.
But they had to go through all this to get it.
Yeah. It sounds like this Wormald guy was not going to give up. I mean, he traveled all the way to Washington. The New Zealand Herald reported that the U.S. NSF did not interview the employees when they landed in New Zealand at the end of the winter, according to the New Zealand Herald. Additionally, Wormald revealed that the U.S. State Department contacted the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade in New Zealand to ask why Wormald was being so persistent.
Well, I don't know. Is it because it's his job?
And he's not getting the stuff willingly, so he has to be persistent, possibly. The U.S. DOJ was not cooperative with Wormald. They considered his investigation an informal inquiry. He had to contact the NSF directly to ask them for help. He asked the NSF to give him the information of the people who were at the base. It wasn't until 2006 that the NSF agreed to forward this questionnaire to the people who had been working at the base at the time. Wormald only received the limited number of responses, and none of them were what were considered to be the more critical witnesses.
I mean, it is 6 years later.
It is.
I mean, I can't even tell you what I ate for lunch yesterday, let alone 6 years ago.
But is it 6 years later because the cooperation was so bad? Could this have happened much sooner, and then maybe the responses would have been greater? Absolutely. I think that's the argument that they would make.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about this revelation that there was a culture of heavy drinking and drug use. Apparently, some witnesses testified about cannabis being grown on the base and a stash of marijuana being found at one of the telescopes. All right. You got people growing weed, smoking weed, looking at stars.
Sounds like a typical Saturday
for you. I got you. But, this kind of worms its way into one theory behind the NSF's seeming reluctance to help New Zealand authorities. And it's this alleged drug use on base, which, if true, obviously would make the company look bad.
Of course.
They have a zero tolerance policy for drug use, and alcohol consumption is regulated. Now, you can have all the policies you want, but if they're not enforced, or it comes out that a bunch of stuff is going on underneath your nose and you don't know about it, it is going to make you look bad. And so is that the reason why they didn't want to fully cooperate and, have all these people talk and give out their contact information? I don't know.
Maybe.
That's been one theory. However, evidence from the inquest and interviews with crew members suggests that the people on base didn't strictly follow these policies. I think that's quite evident.
Yeah, I think we're pretty clear on that one.
With the smoking weed while looking through the telescope, it was said that 18 bottles of liquor were found in Rodney Marks' room after his death, despite the fact that he could get access to alcohol at a bar on base. Dr. William Silva described Rodney as having a high tolerance and told the Herald, "I suspected some degree of alcoholism based in large part on his ability to do well at poker by drinking his mates under the table." Now, what I would say is when you go back to the theory that he was making his own alcohol,
right?
To me, this kind of blows that out of the water.
Yeah.
The guy's got 18 bottles of liquor in his room. He doesn't need to make his own alcohol and accidentally poison himself.
Yeah, he's got his own supply.
Not to mention the fact that he could go to the bar on base and drink.
And it sounded like he didn't have problems with money.
No, that was said.
Yeah.
Will Silva told Science Magazine that Rodney tended to be a binge drinker, but so were a lot of people. Rodney certainly wasn't an alcoholic. He didn't need alcohol to get through the day. So, we've got some terms being thrown around: binge drinker, alcoholic, and we've got some conflicting information.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic, do you have to drink every day?
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not.
I don't either. If you're a binge drinker who, kind of goes wild every few days. Are you an alcoholic by definition? And what separates the two?
Right. Are you just a Frank the Tank every now and then? Or
we talked about testimony regarding marijuana allegedly being grown at the base. Manager Scott Hulse reported smelling marijuana while walking outside. Hulse believed someone was growing marijuana and hiding the plants in the air ducts. He also said that he was criticized for being heavy-handed, but felt it was necessary because of what he called pretty severe alcohol abuse problems. So, it does sound like there's a lot going on at this base.
Yeah.
According to the New Zealand Herald, Sonia Walter wrote in a blog post, "There is an unbelievable amount of alcohol down here." She also wrote, "I'm not aware of any AA meetings taking place, although it wouldn't be a bad idea for quite a few people here."
I'm guessing you're stuck in a location with limited things to do. If you do like alcohol, you're probably going to consume it more than you normally would, because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, I think that could be part of it. Sonia was questioned about the needle marks found on Rodney's arms and said she knew about some people smoking pot, but did not know about any hard drug use. There were reports of people on base making what was called toast juice, something I've never heard of.
Me neither.
Toastiness is a condition that occurs when people spend winter in the South Pole. The symptoms are short attention span, poor memory, and irritability. I have all of those.
You do.
And I'm not in the South Pole. Toast juice was brewed on base. This was initially considered a possible source of methanol, but this was later discounted. Warmold obtained a bottle of this toast juice for testing, and it was found to be 71% alcohol.
That's high. Pretty high.
Yeah, that's pretty high test. The police did ask about drug use in the questionnaire, and this was based on a statement given by Dr. Thompson before Rodney's cause of death was known. In his statement, Dr. Thompson said that Rodney disclosed that he had used intravenous drugs in what he called the distant past, but that he did use intravenous drugs at a party in Christchurch before he came to the South Pole. And I want to go back to the 2 needle marks on Rodney's right arm. Rodney was said to have been right-handed. It also came out that Dr. Thompson used this site to draw blood, a decision that has been questioned by Rodney's family and Detective Warmold. Warmold noted Dr. Thompson seems to have made little, if any, direct inquisition of Mr. Marks in relation to these fresh needle marks. So this statement that Rodney was right-handed, are they trying to say that if he had used intravenous drugs, the marks would have most likely been in his left arm? Because I'm pretty sure people can shoot up with their offhand, with their non-dominant hand.
Yeah.
However, Rodney's body showed no signs of illegal drugs. At the inquest, it was suggested that a crew member whose name has not been made public was using intravenous drugs and offering drugs to others. So, I think we've got to dissect it a little bit. It sounds like he admitted that he had used intravenous drugs at one point before he got to the base.
Right.
Is that where the needle marks came from, or would they have been gone by, that point in time? But I don't think it matters, because if there are no illegal drugs found in his system, then what do you make of it? Unless you make the case that he was injected with a bunch of methanol. By someone.
Yeah, since that's the only trace that they had.
Dr. Thompson testified that when he got to the base in November 1999, he found that the Ectochem machine, which measures blood chemistry, had to be recalibrated every time it was turned back on, which took 8 to 10 hours. Thompson testified that he was too busy providing critical care to Rodney once he arrived on May 12th. Apparently, the machine was not operating properly because there was a failure of the lithium battery that helped the machine maintain its memory. If the machine had been kept up and running, it still could have been used.
Sounds like this is a ongoing problem. Sounds like it was, I mean, in 1999, and this was 2000 when he went in to see the doctor. I mean, you think that would be something that they would have a high priority of fixing.
Or maybe you leave it on? I don't know. If it takes 8 to 10 hours to fire up, that's not going to help you in any emergency situation.
No.
According to Science Magazine, Dr. Martin Sage testified that Rodney's chances of survival would have been higher if he had a proper diagnosis, but Will Silva testified that he doubted that the normal treatment, infusing a 10% ethanol solution, would have been successful given the magnitude of Rodney's intoxication. The coroner's report stated that if the icachem were working, Rodney's chances of survival would have increased. The coroner blamed Thompson, saying it was his responsibility to keep it calibrated. So again, we have conflicting statements.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how much of this is CYA.
I think some of it for sure.
You know, one side on defense saying, I don't know if it would have worked anyway because they don't want to look bad. You know, others believe that identifying Rodney's illness as methanol poisoning would have led to a more thorough investigation.
I think we can't argue that one.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So would it have saved his life? I don't know.
No, I don't know about that either.
Obviously, the chances would have been higher.
Sure.
You would definitely have to say that. But one thing is for certain. If that level of methanol would have been detected, my assumption is there would have been a much more thorough investigation, because then you are looking at a potential homicide,
right,
and probably would treat it as such. It's been almost 23 years since Rodney Marks died. Paul Marks told Science Magazine, after so long, it's probably impossible to ever know what happened, and if he died by sinister means or by accident, that's something we have to live with. It seems as though all investigations into Rodney's death have concluded. No one knows the exact source of the methanol, though it was likely the methanol that was stored on base. And we still don't know if Rodney intentionally ingested it or not. The evidence in this case does not seem to clearly indicate an accident, suicide, or a murder. You know, and that's an argument that I made, you know, back when the coroner came out with, you know, some of his statements.
Right.
I don't know how you can conclusively say much of anything about exactly how this thing went down.
Like all you can put on that death certificate is unknown.
You know, and we did kind of tick off a few theories. You know, this theory that he was making his own alcohol because he was a binge drinker, that one to me doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
No.
You know, 18 bottles of liquor found in his room. It sounds like there was alcohol all over that base.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a hard time finding it.
No. So why would he need to do that? Well, he wouldn't. Is it possible that he tried to end his own life? And I would say, yes, it's possible. The circumstances don't suggest it. You know, everything that we kind of laid out seemed as though his life was moving in a great direction. He was in love and all of that, but you can't rule it out. And then could he have been murdered? And I think you have to kind of look at that as a possibility as well.
Yeah. Could have been somebody jealous, of his work or his relationship.
Yep.
Or maybe somebody just didn't like him.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? I think that's the troubling thing with this case. Yeah, you have all the back and forth between New Zealand and the U.S. How much cooperation was there? Should there have been more? Should there have been a more thorough investigation? You know, you can debate all of those questions, but at the end of the day, there's very little known other than what the cause of death was. And that's, this methanol poisoning. How it got in his system, why it got in his system, I don't know that we'll ever know.
I don't know either. I think it's probably unlikely.
The other thing that, I was thinking about was, so, you mail all these questionnaires out.
Right.
And only X number of people reply. it's kind of the same argument that I make a lot of the time, which is if you were someone that had something to do with it, obviously you're not replying, or you're replying that you didn't see anything, you don't know anything,
Exactly.
You're not going to be helpful anyway.
Right.
But that's it for our episode on Rodney Marks, the South Pole poisoning. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Love to hear those.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Eric from San Diego. I had to just stop listening to the murder of Julie Love because you guys were talking about how she was notorious for running out of gas. I have anxiety when the gas gets below half a tank. My husband is the complete opposite. He never ran out of gas, but he will definitely test the limits of how far our gas can go. And then now that like most vehicles now will like tell you how many miles left. So if I even get down to single digits, I freak out. But I just wanted to call you guys because it's like a battle between me and my husband. So that was it. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful time. Well, I don't know, but I'm tired. All right, have a good one. Bye.
I don't know. I'm tired. I'm tired too. So my wife and I have this exact same thing going.
Yeah.
Now, she said she would freak out if she got down to single digits. I would actually freak out if I got down to single digits because you don't know how accurate that is.
Right.
My wife, she doesn't even like to get down below like 3/4.
Oh, okay.
She
constantly feels it up.
Maybe I'm over exaggerating it a little bit, but I'll Kramer that thing.
Oh, I bet you will.
And just to kind of see how far I can go. And when we're on vacation, it stresses her out so much.
Yeah.
If the thing starts dinging and I look down, she's like, pull over right now. I said, it says we got like 35 miles still.
Like, I got a few more exits I can go.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it.
Like she's white knuckling it the whole way.
Yeah. The only thing I hate about those is when you're driving and it goes off and it says you have 40 miles left. And you go 2 miles and it says you have 30 miles left. I'm like, wait a minute. Where'd the extra miles go?
Yeah, I don't know how accurate it is.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. This is Susan from Illinois. I'm listening to the Elijah Bear Diaz. Sorry if it's loud. I'm on the highway. And Gibby just did something excellent that you need to give him credit for. He said maybe they meant to put 2. And they just forgot to put the extra O on the end. He was talking about the text message that came. So he knows 2 and 2 have 2 different spellings, actually 3. And I was like, you need to give him credit for that, Gibby. You're the best. You guys are wonderful. I love the podcast. Stay safe. Keep your own time tickets.
So what I love about that voicemail so much is she's digging us both at the same time.
Yeah.
But in a really kind of covert and smart way.
Very smart.
She's saying, I didn't catch it.
Right.
I should have gave you your props. At the same time saying that it's amazing that you know the difference between
2 and 2?
TO and TO.
It is amazing.
So I really got a kick out of that.
Yeah.
And obviously I know she's joking around and she says she loves you. But I like those because those are smart. And those are our kind of humor.
Exactly.
And our kind of digs and things like that. So, all right, buddy, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows, available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.